The focus of today's session is on practical aspects of DKIM, and the reason I do the first 30 minutes is to give you the impractical aspects of DKIM, which is to say the motivation and background and a little about the sort of architecture and such. And then Murray's going to actually tell you about how to use it in some detail. How many people here could believe that they know what the letters DKIM stands for? Look around. I actually want the hands raised because I want to have a sense of what the audience is and what you already know. Next one. Who here has read an interesting DKIM document, which is to say something more than a marketing blurb? Is there? Yeah. Oxymoron, yes, acknowledge. All right, so I'm sorry, do that again, raise your hands. So we actually have a fair percentage of people with some serious exposure, which means that my 30 minutes really is a warm-up act and you just have to be patient. So I apologize for that. Some of you have heard some of my religious harangue in this space, but you're going to have to hear it again, and don't think it's changed a lot, so I apologize for that. And that's trying to set the stage for what DKIM does and does not do, which we're still trying to figure out. Actually, let's carry this little query process one step further. Who has seen this slide before? Because this is not close to the first time I've done it. Raise your hand if you think you've seen it, because it has not changed from before. Only a few hands, all right. One of the challenges in a technology like DKIM, which performs a somewhat new function, even though we've been working on it for about 7 years, is pretty much all of you and everybody in this industry has necessarily been focused on finding bad mail from bad actors. Mail from bad actors is quite different from mail from good actors. One of the examples is mail from bad actors tries to pretend that it's from good actors, whereas mail from good actors just tries to get you to believe who they are. The techniques that are necessary for finding the mail from bad actors is necessarily being very suspicious, necessarily being on your own, because the other side is not only not cooperating, they're trying to deceive you. And that's very different from a world in which the place that's originating this mail is to some extent, at least some extent, trying to collaborate with you. So what you have is today this fire hose of mail coming in, and some of it's good and some of it's bad, and you get it all together, and you get to try to figure out which ones are good and which ones are bad. So you're on your own. It's a unilateral process on the receive side. You're on your own, and it necessarily involves heuristics, which means that sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. False negatives and false positives are built into this realm. And the goal with the world of DKIM and related efforts is to start from an assumption that you can create a layer of trust in which the origin side and the receiving side are collaborating, and the extent of the collaboration may vary. And so you may have legitimate actors, notice I didn't say good or bad, you may have legitimate actors on the origin side who are more aggressive than you'd like them to be, but they're legitimate. And that's very different from the serious bad actors who are, whether they're violating a law or not, they're behaving in a criminal fashion. Their style of doing business is identical, really, with the way crime is done. And so the goal is to find a way to separate the mail stream so that there's some stuff which falls into a more trusted channel, and there's lots of different ways of defining the trust and gradations and such, but that you can say, I know it's legitimate, I'm going to therefore be able to treat it differently from this other stuff which may or may not be legitimate. And these days it's what, 98%, 95% is not. When you have a basis for trust of some of the mail, you can start handling the mail differently. And it's been a challenge to try to figure out how to depict this. This is only the latest version of an attempt that a number of us, where this primarily comes out of Mike Adkins, we've iterated on it. Some of you may have seen earlier versions of this. Some of you have commented on that, and the failures of the first one, where for me, I was trying to explain this to my brother, who's also in the business, and halfway through trying to explain it to him, and he has a security background, I realized that the original version was useless. So Mike and I spent a fair amount of time trying to get the current version, which we think at least is useful to the point where people will want to beat on it and improve it, but it's probably still somewhat useful. The idea behind this is you have different kinds of organizations that are responsible for mail, and you have different streams of mail from them. And an example of a stream would be transactional mail, such as an order confirmation, or marketing mail in the sense of bulk sending, which we're all in love with, or it might be corporate mail, like a job offer, a real one. And this cross-product, thank you, this cross-product of the different kinds of specific mail streams versus the different kinds of organizations lets you try to create these 9 cells. And in the real world of anybody building engines that has this kind of differentiation, it's more cells than this, but this seemed like the most we could stretch it to have anything that was still something we could talk about. And so just to step through some of the logic, and I want to stress, the main point behind this exercise is a style of thinking rather than that you love the exact choices we made. This is not a standard, this is a pedagogical tool. So if you have a kind of mail that is inherently low risk, you look at it, it's a few pieces of text, there's no interesting words in it, and for whatever other reasons you decide this is just not a dangerous piece of mail, and it appears to come from an organization, I'm sorry, you know it is from an organization that is just not been a problem, then you can treat it rather nicely, and that's the upper left, so that's benign. Notice that the center one is classed as typical, and that's because in the real world today, most mail has the most mail stream, most mail that you get has a high degree of problem to it. You really have to parcel through the mail quite a lot, and you may have some knowledge of the organization that's sending it, and you may have some basis for saying that there's perhaps a little bit of risk because the average piece of mail coming in today carries a likelihood of a fair amount of risk. But it's not huge. Your virus detector hasn't gone off, for example. You've had now some time to look at the screen. I assume you've looked through it. Are people having reactions to it? Any thoughts, questions, comments, other than the Atkins? It's only because they bias the discussion, not because they're wrong. Yes?
This is very similar to a very well-adopted standard for trust frameworks in the identity management space, published by NIST.
So it just occurred to me, I've got a microphone here and you don't, so I need to repeat what you're saying. You're saying this is similar to a trust framework in the identity management arena published by NIST. Okay, well that's interesting. Well, Mike and I have a little background in there. He might have a lot, I'm not sure. I have only a little, so maybe this was independent invention, maybe it was unintentional theft, but that's okay, that validates it. Any other comments? Okay. This is intended as a way of describing something that really is an end-to-end system for processing mail that might have trust associated with it. So you have an author, and there's potentially quite a lot between the author and the area in the bottom. but we wanted to skip past that. And notice the mail comes, oh, I'm sorry, no, the part directly below the author is still part of that origination side of things. So you have the author creating the message, and some sort of identifier is attached to the mail. That's the responsible identity. Might be the author, might be the author's organization, their internal operations, it might be their ISP. Somebody who's willing to step up and say, I know something about this. And that defines an identifier to attach to the message, and then you have to do something to attach it. Whether you do it by registering in the DNS the way SPF does, whether you do it with digital crypto technology the way DKIM does, you attach it, and that's the lower left, the identifier signer. And that's the beginning of what DKIM does. And then you send the mail, and it gets over into the receive side. First thing that they have to do is find that identifier and validate it. And then they hand it up to something which says, okay, I have an identifier I can believe. What do I know about the organization associated with it? That's a sort of first stage assessment. It's tied to the identifier. And when they're done with that, it's then fed into the typical handling filter, which is this, these days, mass of heuristic rules and other mechanisms that decide whether to deliver, whether to display it a certain way, and so on. Probably nothing new or confusing to folks here. The main point behind this particular slide is to call out some separations of function that may not be part of what we typically think of, but are absolutely essential when injecting something new into the system like DKIM. All right, so I've actually primed this a little more than I intended to. Plus, this is an audience that knows more than I was concerned might be. If you already know a lot about DKIM, please don't answer this question. I'm looking for people who are actually taking a tutorial to start from a fairly basic level. What do you think DKIM is for? What do you think it does? Be bold. Yes? Block spam. Okay. By the way, I'm not going to say yes or no to anything. I just want people to give their version. That was a nice example, excellent starting point. What other ways? Yeah. To get through spam filters. Okay. Any other? By the way, I want to stress, both of those examples are things that people do say and do believe about what DKIM or SPF does, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for legitimate beliefs, whether they're right or wrong. I want to hear what some people in the room come in believing. I'm sorry? Authenticates messages. Thank you. Like a password proves who you are. One more. There were more than one. Authenticates the sender. Thank you. Okay, so I put together my own version of that list, and you'll see that everything that you guys said, I believe, is on this. And I'm going to tell you that the correct answer of what DKIM does is only one of those bullets. That all of the others are not what DKIM does. Sorry? What? Go ahead. Second from the bottom. Authenticates the author or origin of a message. Thank you. Absolutely not. It doesn't even come close to doing that. This is perfect, because this is absolutely what people in the industry tend to say and believe, and it is absolutely not what it does. And mind you, I told you I primed the pump more than I intended to, because I put this slide one later than I meant to. And that is, in the previous slide, I actually told you what it did, but I didn't quite use the right language, which is fine, because I wanted exactly what happened just now to happen. The third bullet is the right answer. It does nothing put a domain name onto the message. All right, it it authenticates that use of the domain name. But all DKIM does is give you an identifier on the message that you can believe. And that, by the way, that identifier has nothing to do with the from field, nothing to do with the sender field, nothing to do with the SMTP mail from, nothing to do with the SMTP hello or e-hello. It has nothing, it might be the same, but it might not. So, and by the way, those of us working on DKIM have gone through some processes to try to figure out how to describe what it does. And so if you go and look at the RFC that specifies DKIM signing, you'll find the wrong language, in my opinion. And a whole bunch of us collaborated on creating that wrong language. And if you go and look at the next major document we did, which was an overview document, it's better, but it's still wrong. This is what's in the latest document, just going through the final stages of approval, which is the deployment document, which has, and mind you, I wrote this bit of text, and I've been worried about this problem through every iteration, and it still has some problems in it, but it's closer. DKIM puts an identifier on a message. It affixes it in a way that lets the receiver believe it is being used in an authorized manner. But all that means is there is an assertion of some level of accountability. How much is not defined. And so, for example, an outbound ISP might have a very free-form service with many millions of users about whom that they not only don't know much, they know a lot of them misbehave. But they're willing to sign it to say, this did come through my operation. But I haven't a clue whether it's any good. So it does not, in particular, validate the from field. You can have a perfectly good DKIM signature that is actually quite useful, but the from field could still be forged, and that might actually be okay. It does not validate the message. The crypto technology that's used does things that are algorithmically the same as what secure messaging algorithms do, but it's not doing it for that purpose, and it doesn't accomplish that end. The most you can claim is that from the time of signing to the time of validation, it will validate the data integrity, which is different from the content validity, the data integrity of the parts signed, but only the parts signed. And DKIM actually doesn't require you sign all or necessarily any of the body. Okay, so this now puts, this is all of the architecture you need to know about DKIM. And so I'll step through it very, very quickly. In the center, you see there's a message and at the top, and you've got the originating part of the world, the author, the operation of the author's environment. ADMD, anybody not familiar with that term? Seriously, I mean, and normally I like to ask questions that encourage people who know something to raise their hand. In this case, I'm going against that. Who doesn't know what ADMD stands for? Okay. Who here has heard of X400? Raise your hands high, because this is just a bit of amusement. It's a fraction of the room. Yet X400 was the industry standard for email for quite a few years. And it had the term ADMD. It's a reasonably comfortable term being used in email today. There is an internet mail architecture document which tries to describe sort of all the components of the internet mail service we use today that I finally completed, I guess, last year. And one of the interesting discussions was about trust domains or administrative domains. So areas which have a boundary of trust and responsibility. And ADMD stands for administrative domain. And the definition is similar to the way it was used in X400, but a little different. So it's just a way of saying the originator's world or the recipient's world or some intermediary's world. And it's about the trust issues rather than the protocol issues. And that part of the world affixes the domain name and signs the message. and it gets received, and then they have to figure out whether the signature is valid, whether the domain name that's affixed is being used in an authenticated way. And what you see around the outside are some of the components that feed into this. Clearly, if you're going to sign a message, you have to have a key, or actually you have to have two, because it uses public key technology, so you have to sign with a private key and decrypt with a public key. That's as close as I'm going to come to pretending that I can explain public key technology. If you need to know more, you should, but it isn't going to be from me, and it isn't really in the nature of what's in Murray's presentation either. My attitude is that's well-established technology. There are good libraries for it, and what's important is we understand what these routines do for us, but not necessarily the math of how they work. You see an assessment box, which is similar to the one that I had 2 slides back, and the filtering engine, which is also similar. So this is a variant of 2 slides back. Notice that there is potentially some differential handling between having a signature, which is the verify signature and it passes and you go down to assessment, versus you don't have a signature, but you might still do some checking. And this is where ADSP that we'll mention later comes in.